Among the many Miyazaki films that I could have watched growing up, I saw two, and these were the mainstays of my childhood: Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke. Both films are great in their own right, but I feel like Spirited Away was the one that really taught me how to enter adulthood with an open mindset about moving forward. Now, because of this, I decided to revisit my nostalgia and watch Spirited Away to see exactly what about the movie stuck out to me so many years ago. And I think I understand now, as an adult, why this movie worked so well in teaching me how to grow up. And the answer is because it celebrates being ordinary. Now, I know that's a pretty bold claim because Miyazaki movies are usually filled with gorgeous visuals, amazing soundtracks, and just everything that speaks feel good. But that doesn't always mean that these movies are without a message. Spirited Away focuses its message on how the ordinary 10-year-old girl that we see throughout the entire film interacts with her environment. And these interactions are some of the most genuine representations of human emotion that I've seen in animated films, and I think that's why it resonated with me so well into my adulthood. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about why these scenes were so important and why this representation of emotion really mattered in the grander scope of things. The opening sequence establishes empathy with Chihiro as a character because it takes the time to show us cause and effect. Cause being an event in the world around Chihiro, and effect being Chihiro's emotional response to it. So simply put, she reads this card that wishes her good luck to a new life, and it's important to keep this card in mind because it does come up later in the film. But essentially, this goodbye signals to us that the cause is her moving to a new town, moving to a new life, leaving behind an old one, and leaving behind old friends. And the effect we get here is Chihiro's reaction of being upset. Look at her. She's clearly upset about this whole thing, and she clearly doesn't like this idea of moving. Interestingly enough, this plays well into the other moments of the film because this introduces this whole idea that Chihiro is about to enter a world that is going to change. Soon enough, as Chihiro and her family are traveling to find their new house, they essentially stumble into the spirit world. A lot of events happen from this point on where Chihiro essentially finds herself losing her parents because they decide to eat at this like food place that is actually meant for the spirits, and because they meddle with the spirits' food, they get turned into pigs. Chihiro runs away and she essentially tries to turn back to their car, but she isn't able to because of this big river that suddenly appears out of nowhere. And because of that, she starts to literally fade into the spirit world. These are important story beats because it starts to externalize this change that that was happening to Chihiro first internally. And it essentially starts taking form in essentially the events that happen going forward. Now, what happens next is a bit more interesting because in addition to losing herself in this world and also losing her parents, Chihiro starts to lose what is, I think, the most pivotal part of this movie, and that is her name. So for the sake of consistency, I'm going to call her Chihiro throughout the entire video essay here. But what happens next is that essentially after her parents get turned into pigs, this mysterious boy named Haku essentially tells her, hey, if you want to get them back, you're gonna have to work for the bathhouse under Yubaba. And Yubaba is essentially the person who controls this entire bathhouse. She's the one who runs the whole operation. We see Chihiro going through this sequence of events where she's navigating the bathhouse from bottom to top, which is really interesting. And it ends with her confrontation with Yubaba at the very top. Yubaba has this very nice penthouse suite, but it's clear that she is the one who's kind of the grumpy witch type of character. And it plays interestingly to this world because it tells us, the audience, that this is the head of this world. She has rules to abide by. Now, in doing so, we are of course starting to wonder where this is going to go. And this is where the name comes in. Chihiro begs her to work and eventually gets through to her and has to sign some paperwork, as with every job. And what's interesting is this moment right here. Yubaba takes some characters from Chihiro's name and shortens it down to Sen. This represents the final form of loss in this film. So at this point, she has now lost her way home, she has lost her parents, and she has lost her name. And the movie makes a great deal to mention that names and identity and everything that is connected to it are all intertwined with what it means to be home, what it means to push forward as well. Moving forward from here is one of my favorite moments of the film. So now that she's essentially lost these three aspects of her way home, her name, and also her parents, it's clear that the movie has established her end goal: save her parents and get out of the spirit world while also reclaiming her name in some way. What's interesting is what happens after all of these events. She spends her first night at the bathhouse now that she has a job here, and Haku tells her the next morning to meet up with him at the bridge, and he will go take her to see her parents. A lot of confusion there, but basically Haku takes Chihiro the next morning to see her parents, and they're at this like little pig farm. Now what's interesting about this interaction is that when Chihiro finally goes to see her parents, this happens. Please excuse the awkward freeze frame. I had to add this in because YouTube's copyright system was essentially blocking my video. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is also narrate over the music. But essentially what I want to bring to your attention once again is that in this moment where Chihiro feels like she's lost everything, Haku comes in with the save and gives her her name back and her clothes. And these two important aspects of her identity are going to be touched on later on in the film. But what this is essentially reinforcing is that, you know, the parts that belong to you are unique for a reason, and that in order for Chihiro to move forward, it is imperative that she gets these back again. And also, I just want to point out this rice ball scene. It's one of my favorites of the movie just because they just look absolutely delicious, and I mean, it's so good that, you know, she starts crying. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally always wanted to know what was in those rice balls, because if they were that good that she started crying, then sign me up. This scene is important in stressing once again that Chihiro is an ordinary character that we're meant to empathize with. It essentially allows the plot in a way to breathe. It gives Chihiro the space to reflect on everything that goes on, and in this moment of kindness, she is allowed to kind of let go, to let her emotions run and to be upset about everything. In addition to this, what's really interesting is what is given back to her. Note that up to this point, there has been multiple opportunities for Chihiro to gain some sort of power up or to receive a way to fight back in a physical sense, but she doesn't. Haku comes back with a set of clothes that were Chihiro's from the very beginning, and also a card so that Chihiro would never forget her name. And I think it's really important to mention that Haku says, Yubaba controls you by taking your name, and essentially holding on to that will help you push forward. To me, this was Miyazaki's way of telling us, the audience, that whoever you are, don't forget all the experiences that have accumulated to kind of build up this character. He also wants to remind us that we have meaning in our names and that they're special. That whatever you call yourself, you build yourself up to that person. And that's like super cool to me, because at a young age, it's basically saying, hey, you know, you have a whole life ahead of you. And retrospectively now as an adult, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of have. It gives you a reason to essentially be proud of yourself. Now, all of this kind of culminates in this moment towards the end of the film. And like I mentioned before, I'm gonna try not to go into too much spoilers. So once again, if you don't want to be too spoiled for the rest of the movie, feel free to take a break, because I will be talking about some end moments of the film. I think what's important at this part of the film is, again, the weight of your identity and the weight of experience that comes with it. So because of the plot, and I say that lightly, not as a joke, but there are some things that happen that I'm totally glossing over because I just want to get to this point. Haku steals a magical item from Yubaba's twin sister, Zeniba, and Chihiro has to go visit Zeniba to essentially return said magical artifact. Now, what's interesting about this too is that Zeniba is Yubaba's twin sister. And when we meet her, she looks and sounds exactly the part. I believe they even share the same voice actor. Now, what's interesting about how they differ is how Zeniba acts. Yubaba is a controlling and bossy person. So you can tell that she's a bit more of the sterner side. She's never truly evil, however, but note that she's just very much, I own you, you have no right to talk back to me. Zeniba is the complete opposite. She is the embodiment of sweet granny and is one of the best characters in the film because of it. And because of this like similarity and like compare and contrast that's going on, the movie is essentially trying to again address this whole idea of identity. Zeniba and Yubaba share everything in terms of likeness and voice, but they don't share the same name and therefore are allowed to be separate characters. It allows us again to look at how they act, how they react to certain situations, much like what we've been doing as we follow Chihiro throughout her entire journey. Knowing this, it's only natural that Chihiro asks Zeniba for advice. They're twin sisters. Like, it's just logical that in order to maybe beat Yubaba, she would have to talk to Zeniba. But Zeniba offers her only this: everything that you remember, you never truly forget, and it stays with you. And this is one of my favorite pieces of advice from the film, because it essentially legitimizes and validates identity, but more so the aspect of your identity that comes from experience. It's essentially saying that all of the things that Chihiro has done throughout the entire film are all because of her own volition. Her adherence to her name and remembering everything that it means to her has essentially drawn out this human perseverance to find ways to move forward and find ways to essentially, beat Yubaba at her own game, but without having to resort to anything aside from whatever is already given to her. She is only really equipped, or rather re-equipped, with her name and her clothes. These pieces of identity help her to push forward, and that's why I think this movie was so detrimental to teaching kids how to grow up, and also kind of what inspires me to honestly keep watching anime that I do today. Anime, and especially like Miyazaki films, have always had this magic to them that don't just address the world around you, but it addresses how that builds you up. And I think that's just kind of the beauty of Spirited Away.